So I woke up on a stone slab, and it was one of those things where I was a little disoriented because I'd gone to bed the night before with COVID, and then I had like a really long sleep, but I woke up on a stone slab, and I was wrapped pretty tightly in like this sort of like old-timey like fabric of some kind that I didn't 100% recognize, but like, you know, I had to like kind of weasel my way out of it, you know, like literally tear myself out of this thing. But I wasn't wearing any clothes. I was butt-ass naked, and
nice.
And I turned around and I put my feet on the ground, and I realized that I was in what can only be described as a tomb. There were a lot of like.
Are you sure that it couldn't be described as something else?
No. It had like it had little like.
Sometimes there's synonyms.
I've played Dark Souls. Okay, I know what a tomb looks like.
Why don't you describe it for me, and then I'll see if I can describe it as something other than a tomb.
Okay. There were like holes in the wall where like coffins that like were put. There were bones scattered across the floor.
I've already got another word.
Me too.
I've already got one.
Yeah, I would describe it as a catacombs.
Oh, I've got a third word. Mausoleum.
Ooh, well, there you go. But it can only be described as a tomb. And And I was like, oh shit, I gotta get the fuck out of here. So I grabbed, the thing I was wrapped in, and I go to the door, and there's this giant stone that's like been put in front of it. And I bang on the door. I'm like, hey, I'm alive in here. And on the other side, I hear,
hey, I'm living here.
I hear these two voices on the other side, and they go, Sanctus, Sanctus Domine, or whatever. I don't know. I don't fucking speak Latin. And they start to like roll away the stone. And we were like one together, 1, 2, 3. We roll away the stone, and I get out the other side, and there are these two centurions, with the full hats looking at me. And
that's why they were speaking liturgical Latin.
They're centurion hats.
I love centurion hats with little brushes on top, so they can take it off and also use it as like cleaning the floors.
Ubi caritas et amor.
And we kind of looked at each other for a moment, and they communicated to each other, and they looked at me and they said, "We thought you were dead," because they're Roman.
So they speak some English, but with a distinct Latin accent.
Well, it's weird because we were all speaking Aramaic.
Okay.
And I was like, and they raised their spears to me like, oh, we thought you were dead. We have to kill you now. And I was like, oh, how's this going to end? And then the stone just kind of fell over and squished them with like a cartoon like sploosh sound. And they just exploded. And I ran away and made my way back to here to recording the podcast. So that's what my week's been like. And I kept the cloth that I was wrapped in. And I had this moment where I was like, well, this looks ancient. This looks like it might be worth something. I think I might sell this.
Okay.
I think I might sell this to the highest bidder. But then I was like, I don't know. This clearly belonged to the two Romans who were dead. And it feels like I'd be like perpetuating like extra violence against them by selling it,
They deserve it because they started colonizing Brooklyn a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so it's violence against an oppressor.
That is true. It is violence against the oppressor. But I still kind of felt bad about it. But then I sold it anyway because of all the stuff they did to me. I just thought that, the shroud of Turin about is fair play.
What?
AJ's back, baby!
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast willing to wear George Washington's wig and be unashamed of it. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
And joining us here today, we have a friend of mine, somebody who you may have heard of him from his podcast, Michael and Us. You may have heard of him from his various great articles in Jacobin. And he's also working on an upcoming book. We're very excited to have him here today. It is Luke Savage.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Luke, when we were talking about doing something for the show, you had mentioned this particular movie, Man of the Year.
Well, I remember in 2006 when I guess I would have been, 16, something like that. I remember there being a lot of hype about it. I did not see it at the time. Fast forward 10 or 12 years later, I've got a podcast where we specialize in kind of watching films from this era, kind of films that maybe liberal, maybe conservative, but either way have some pretense to great, profundity or insight into politics, but actually are fundamentally banal and don't really have anything to say. And the thing about this movie is that I mean, there's only this film to me belongs in a pantheon of movies that I've discovered through my podcast. I mean, a small aristocracy of elite films that embody this particular type of pretentious incoherence, I think, better than anything else. And so I love the movie. I mean, not actually. I think it's like absolute garbage. But I mean, I did find myself laughing out loud a lot watching it because it thinks so much of itself, and there's just nothing there.
Luke, here's my question for you. Why make one movie when you could make every movie at once?
Yeah, it's a good question, and actually the broadness of the movie is something I hope we'll get into, because I think that is one of the many things it does to undercut its own premises.
Totally.
Yeah, my first idea, like, I don't remember seeing the trailers for this. AJ, of course you do, but like, I always got this one mixed up with Head of State, the Chris Rock movie.
Oh yeah.
And then like I've always kind of, before seeing the movie, I was thinking it was like not just like Head of State, but also like Swing Vote and the Jon Stewart one. What is it called? It's got like a faith-based. Yes, Irresistible.
Which feels like it should have come out in 2006.
Well, and it has the title of like a Christian movie.
It sure does.
And so I was expecting something that was like, well, sometimes things are too left, sometimes things are too right. What we really need is to appeal to the man in the middle.
Who is this?
And
who are we speaking to? Is this politics bumpkin guy?
This is me, circa 2006.
Oh wow, you've really grown and changed, Brian.
But it's also not that, right? I mean, and we'll get to this in a little bit, but it's hard to even assign sort of a political agenda or perspective to this film because it's just so lacking. I think before we jump into talking about the thing beat by beat, we should first talk specifically about Barry Levinson, who is the writer and director of this film.
The auteur of Man of the Year.
Oh, God, yeah.
The auteur of the year.
The Federico Fellini of Man of the Year.
Yes.
So Barry Levinson got his start as a variety show guy. He wrote for variety shows in the 70s. But at some point, Barry Levinson kind of became the serious filmmaker dude. Yeah. Right. And the movie that really put him on the map is also the movie that cemented that Robin Williams could be a dramatic movie star, too, which is Good Morning, Vietnam! Of course, everyone's movie that they've heard of.
And Luke, is that one that you've seen?
No, but I have heard the catchphrase many times.
I think it actually holds. I mean, Robin Williams' performance in it is just absolutely stellar. It actually has sort of an Adam McKay kind of arc to his career, right? He starts out as like a big time comedy guy and then decides he really wants to start talking about politics and specifically how Hollywood sort of interacts with politics.
Sure.
And I also think with the success that Adam McKay has with talking about politics, which is not very much.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Well, and Barry Levinson's best political movies, too, are the ones that he doesn't write.
Yes.
Right?
So Wag the Dog.
He didn't write Wag the Dog. He didn't write Good Morning Vietnam. And I don't think Good Morning Vietnam is necessarily all that political of a movie in the same sense. But when it comes to movies that Barry Levinson is like, I'm going to write this and direct this, we of course got his magnum opus Toys.
Oh, I love that movie as a kid. I don't think I really understood anything about it except that I don't know, there were toys and they were fighting stuff, and I thought that was pretty cool.
It's a fascinating movie.
It's part of a wave of toy movies in the 90s, because there's also Small Soldiers. Which
I remember Small Soldiers.
Joe Dante's Small Soldiers, which I think people have kind of grown to appreciate more now. But Toys is this achingly earnest drama about a Willy Wonka type toy heir whose devices end up being used as weapons of war, and it's fucking incoherent, and it's something everybody should see once because it is so bizarre. Well, and this movie is really... in a lot of ways just as bizarre, but with a more plain sheen to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of the genre mixing too in toys that's very much present in Man of the Year, because it is also, despite being like this sort of very earnest Willy Wonka story, is also a romantic comedy at points, and then turns into a thriller, which, you know, as Man of the Year shows with its singular jump scare, is also very interested in exploring.
So why don't we go ahead then and jump right into it?
The trailers for Man of the Year made it look out to be a very different film, because I saw this in theaters when I was 16 years old, and I realized midway through, fell asleep and missed the middle 40-minute, like a middle 40-minute chunk of the film. So it was fun, like finally being able to like rediscover it. Because
and the movie was so complex that you couldn't follow the last 20 minutes.
No. I woke up and it was like Lewis Black was like in the middle of one punchline, and then I woke up and he finished the punchline 40 minutes later. So I felt like I missed nothing. But the trailers,
AJ, I'm so happy that we were able to restore your childhood through this.
No, that's true. This
recording.
There's
I'm
been this
very sorry
giant
that we
hole
still
in my life.
can't restore your foreskin.
So the trailers of this thing made it out to be just a wacky, like Robin Williams comedy of errors, basically. What if a Jon Stewart figure became president of the United States, and what like hilarity would ensue? But what this movie actually is a political thriller where occasionally Robin Williams just pops in to do like a riff for like 10 minutes and then vanishes completely from the movie again.
And then also on the other hand of that, you have fucking Lewis Black working on his Type 5. It's very strange.
Yeah. And lending some legitimacy to like the TV comedy trope, since Lewis Black was a big writer on The Daily Show.
Man of the Year starts with Christopher Walken, everybody's favorite, sitting in a chair doing his Christopher Walken thing. He's giving an interview to like, I don't know, a documentarian or something like that.
This is obvious,
never explained.
Never
obvious
explained.
reshoot territory. They couldn't quite get enough like coherence in the Delacroix voting system prologue that they made up, so they had to get like Christopher Walken, stick him in a wheelchair, and be like, ooh, what's gonna happen here?
But what we learn is that he was involved with this guy, Tom Dobbs, who changed the world. We love Tom Dobbs. And Tom Dobbs is Robin Williams. And we cut to him, and he's doing like one of those pre-show warm-ups on his talk show.
And he's on a set that could be described as minimalist Nickelodeon.
I was really worried that this was going to turn into a network situation. Like he was going to have a monologue or Studio 60.
Or the newsroom.
And I was like, oh, God. And then no, just like everything like every time it starts to look like it's going to impersonate a movie, Levinson deliberately, I think, zigs rather than zags when he probably should have zagged in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he stole the opening credit font from The West Wing, and later they just go out and full reference The West Wing midway through the movie.
Oh yeah, what is the reference? It's like The West Wing meets The Bachelor. Is that what
it's
the
The
Robin
West
Williams
Wing meets The
character
Bachelor.
says?
I missed that. That's
I
horrible.
missed that too. Oh my
Which
God.
maybe can be read as like a meta commentary on the fundamental incoherence of Man of the Year, because like this film is just a mashup of like 4 or 5 different movies and different types of movie.
And different, I think, TV as well, obviously. And this whole part here reminded me of Studio 60 specifically, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Brian, where it's somebody who isn't funny trying to write funny material. And this movie has this problem throughout. It's supposed to be a comedy. I don't think I actually laughed once. Did any of you?
Oh, yeah, I laughed a couple of times. So that's because Robin Williams knows how to land a punchline. Like, I don't think the joke was funny, but like...
that's the thing about like all of his jokes in this, and of course he's a political commentator, like Jon... They make Jon Stewart also exist in this universe.
And Bill Maher. They always...
And
you can't say Jon
Hughes, James Carville. The gang's all here. All your favorites.
All my faves.
This cast is stacked, and also all of those people are mentioned.
But, you know, he really has so much to say about politics. Like... And also, you know, it's just like, oh man, the senators, they're so old. Oh man, those dang lobbyists.
Yeah.
Oh man,
we need to make education
in our
better.
systems.
And also, the immigrants are streaming across the border, and we have to do something about it.
The one time this ever gets specific with politics, and it's like the first time you start to really see him, because it's like the first time he starts making jokes on the campaign. He goes, yeah, it's just so easy for illegal immigrants to get in here, but it's too hard for legal immigrants to get here.
Yeah, the only, probably arguably the only concrete political position he takes in the entire movie is him being to the right of the Democratic and Republican parties on issues of immigration and national security.
But he sure does hate security theater, and that's the thing that matters. He's a plain-spoken man. He's a man of the people, and
he's the man of the year.
He is the man of the year. And to that point, to prove just how much of a man of the year he is, a woman in the audience even says, "Hey, you should run for president." And before long, he announces that he's going to be running for president.
Wow.
They had to add in a Christopher Walken scene explaining that time had passed between her saying that and him announcing his candidacy.
And the background to that is also important because this whole movie is kind of underwritten by this, anxiety about technology and I guess the internet. And so the backstory that the film kind of hastily shoehorns in, pretty unconvincing backstory, is that, this initial clip of him, this is very much like The Newsroom. It's like, somebody just like a guy goes on TV once and says something and it goes viral. And then, because the engine of history is people going on TV and being epic, that like wills the thing into being. And then so pretty soon by the end of the week, it's like, oh, his clip about running for president had 10 million hits. No one had ever seen like anything like this before. And then he runs for president.
Christopher Walken says, the internet was on fire. Over 8 million emails.
8 million emails.
So many emails.
Which even by 2006 is sounding a little
Netscape
crusty.
Navigator crashed. It was ablaze.
It was really weird when Robin Williams looked into the camera and said, "I'd like to announce I'm starting the Connor Project."
I mean, to your point about Dear Evan Hansen, AJ, I felt like this was a similar treatment to the idea of social media clout and social media influence and like being discovered on the web to what stuff like Dear Evan Hansen believes it to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It is true, obviously, that something sometimes happens that causes discourse to blow up real big on the web. We're all on Twitter. We know what that looks like. Mm-hmm. But there are also structural forces that undergird these things, which oftentimes try not to be seen. Right?
Yeah.
It is so rare that you have a true grassroots movement unless you have funding and infrastructure behind and underneath that movement to make it happen. And Luke, I'm sure that you can speak to that.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I mean, this idea that viral moments are, that's what propels everything. I mean, some politicians in particular have really convinced themselves, like, I guess it's probably a bipartisan phenomenon, but like the Kamala Harris campaign, I mean, I'm not exaggerating. I mean, their strategy was, we're not going to really do the early states. Beto O'Rourke as well. Come back to him in a second.
Right.
But the strategy of Kamala Harris's campaign was that they were going to avoid conventional campaigning and they were going to instead go for these viral debate moments. So that's how you found her like saying, that doing like a sort of reverse engineered mic drop moment where she was like, we're going to take away Donald Trump's Twitter account or something like that. And like that was supposed to, or also, her quip at Biden about like the busing issue where she's like, that girl was me. And then her campaign by the end of the debate somehow had that girl was me shirts like ready to go or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
And then like the next day, the campaign also put out a statement saying that she basically supports the exact same
right.
policy
So
as Joe
fucking
Biden regarding
strange.
education and busing. Just insane.
Right. And the O'Rourke campaign, it was the same thing, right? It was like he'd had a bunch of sort of viral off the cuff moments in his unsuccessful run for Senate. And so they thought, well, what if we just, what if we made the whole country out of the viral moment? And and then so all of a sudden, like he wasn't campaigning. He was driving around like in a van or something. He was
like
standing up on
skateboarding.
tables. He was dabbing. He was going to skateboard.
He was getting an Annie Leibovitz like photo spread for Vanity Fair.
Right.
He was streaming his gums when he had a dental surgery. It really
because AOC's streams were so popular. He was like, yeah, I'll be at a dentist appointment. And then like his late campaign thing was like, I'm going to start swearing now.
Yeah.
I'm going to like make a conscious decision to have all of my like big screen grabbed quotes be full of swears.
Right. And what all this stuff misunderstands, just to return to Josh's original point, is that like, it's true that viral moments do happen, right? But usually like genuine organic viral moments happen.
Yeah.
Usually, first of all, you can't reverse engineer that because there's an alchemy to it that you can't predict. But secondly, even when that does happen, it's usually like someone got hit in the nuts in a way that was funny, and it has like 200 million YouTube hits. It's never like history was changed by somebody like went on TV and said, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And so when things do kind of go quote unquote viral, oftentimes the actual explanation, I agree, is, well, there's infrastructure behind it. You know, there's there's a machinery that is making this happen.
Yeah. And I also think that when somebody gets that viral nuts hit video, it's not as if they're then able to go forward and make an entire career as the guy who got hit in the nuts. They can sell a couple t-shirts for a little bit, but that's not sustainable.
They can win the Springfield Short Film Festival.
I don't know. Like the fuck, I can't believe you've done this guy as a member of parliament now.
Right,
so,
exactly. Fuck. So,
well, and speaking of machinery, I do want to get this in. This movie's prologue also has this cut aside to Laura Linney discovering that this big voting machine company, this sort of larger than Dominion, this Delacroix company, has a major flaw in its vote counting system, because it's also, I guess, a centralized, like, cloud-based vote counting system, not just machines at individual locations.
This is so fucking mid-2000s, it hurts.
Yeah.
The
also,
fucking voting machines.
And which it does not have the power to do. Congress makes this mandatory for every voting precinct in America, which, again, like, federal government doesn't really oversee that stuff. That's handled on the state level.
Right. And
whatever.
And to that point, this is when Christopher Walken is describing how Congress passed it and made all the voting machines into Delacroix voting machines. And it just points out the weirdness of the dialogue in this movie that's not improvised by Robin Williams or Louis Black, because I want to read the exact quote, because it seems like it was written by an AI, and it goes like this. It was, of course, a major coup for this Silicon Valley-based company.
Yes.
It's like, how do we get across the fact that they're a Silicon Valley-based company, you know, in a subtle way? Like, we want to, like, you know, we really want to show don't tell on this.
It's like there was some exposition from the screenplay that was left into the script by mistake.
Yeah, it was a screen direction that just was misformatted. Also, Christopher Walken having the time of his life in this movie, like, really elevating lines that would have no reason to sound like poetry.
That's what he's so good at.
He's great. Dobbs is like actually announces his candidacy, starts campaigning, and he gets actually into the main debate between the Democratic, because he's running as an independent, between the Democratic and the Republican nominee, because, and I quote, he got 16 million emails. So it's what started as 8 million. That's
twice as many emails.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is twice the number of emails before. My God.
He forces the establishment's hand, and he is forced onto the debate stage, where he just, for I think an interminable amount of time, just riffs and does bits.
So for a long time, there's this conflict about, is he going to do jokes? Is he going to do jokes at his rallies or at the debate? And he won't do it because he's so concerned about the issues, like the politics aren't good enough, and the trash should be picked up more or something like that. You know, big, real shit that people really want to know. And then he gets up on the stage and he starts talking about, like, what if the Pope was Brazilian? Nuns would be wearing thongs.
Pretty funny. That's great material.
America goes crazy. Yeah.
They lose their minds.
We had to get to this sooner or later. I feel like now is maybe the time to talk about Donald Trump, right? It has to be talked about at least very briefly. The fact that Trump was the first guy to actually go and basically do this. I mean,
it's amazing because this movie could be shown as an example of predicting Donald Trump, but it doesn't come anywhere close to figuring out what that actually would be.
What the plot of this movie actually is it's like, what if Donald Trump happened, but then instead of Trump, it was like Andrew Yang leading his new, like, Forward Party or something. That's what Robin Williams' politics are in this movie. They're like, the system is broken, the establishment is lying to you, and that's why the answer is having a cabinet made up of people from both parties and independents, and we had some accountability, some dang accountability in government for a change. And it's like, it's just like every sort of like radical centrist argument or whatever, the radical centrist theory of politics that you find in a movie like this, or in like Andrew Yang or Ross Perot or any number of things like that, is always like, the system is broken, and that's why all the answers to our problems are like like in each of our hearts, and we're here all along. All we had to do is knock our red shoes together and be back in Kansas. It's like there's never any like there's no, I mean, hate to sound pretentious, but there's no like structural critique. They're like contents to be one, there purports to be one, and then it's always like but like the answer is just like bipartisanship or whatever.
Well, and to the point about how, like, from earlier about how in order to make something happen, you need some sort of a backing behind you. One of the things that we have learned is that he refuses to do TV ads because he doesn't want to take contributions from industries or whatever. And to go to the point of how, like, yeah, going on the stage and being an insult comic obviously worked out very well for Donald Trump. But the reason that he was able to get to that point in the first place was that he was taking patronage from a lot of different industries. And guess what? He paid them back when he got into office.
Yeah.
There's no reason that anybody would ever want to back this candidate from a structural perspective, whether it was an individual voter who's interested in a specific, point of policy, or if you're an industry seeking to get laws, regulations, policies that are more beneficial to your own bottom line.
It is also very funny that Dobbs and Trump actually agree about immigration. That's kind of haunting.
The other reason that Trump's shtick worked, and what doesn't make sense about this movie, is Trump's whole thing worked because he was mean and he was cruel.
Right.
He wasn't just being like an insult comic in a sort of like goofy way like Robin Williams is. He was telling Ted Cruz like, your wife is fucking ugly and stuff like that. And in the midst of that, he was throwing in the stuff about like, well, Jeb Bush is just like bought by real estate or whatever.
Right.
And people liked the latter because, it was true. And because Trump was, saying things about like the Republican establishment that everybody knew, but had been kind of excluded from those, from primaries because of etiquette. But then he was also being mean, and that's what people liked about it. Robin Williams isn't really being mean in this movie. He's just being like a goofball.
Well, the most he goes on is like when he attacks the president, he says, oh, well, you're paid off by like the oil industry. I don't remember if it's the president or the other guy running. It doesn't fucking matter. But he goes crazy on this, and this is another one of his specific things. It's like, well, we need more ethanol in our gas.
Then he transitions classic Robin Williams like stream of consciousness into the thing about like, oh, and what about helium? And then when there's a car crash, everybody goes, and he starts talking in like a helium voice. Classic stuff.
Yeah. So you see, like, you get the impression at this point that okay, so this is going to be a sort of a face in the crowd or a Bob Roberts type situation where like this guy goes out of control. He doesn't know what he's doing. He just knows that he loves to be loved and is going to run with that however much possible. And it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Not even a little bit.
No. I also this entire sequence is so baffling to me because it seems like they just put Christopher Walken and Louis Black in front of a screen and just had them yell random words about things that could potentially be happening on the screen. Like it feels like the screenplay was not finished. They're just like, I don't know, just say dynamite and he's getting mad. Like it's like there's no rhyme or reason to it, and it just seems like it's like he needed to break up Robin Williams' like 20-minute monologue that he just riffed on.
It was the same shot over and over again. The colors were ugly. The angles were wrong.
Yeah, this movie looks like shit.
The tempo of the cuts was strange. To go back to your point, AJ, about like the interjections, I think part of the reason they feel so weird and out of place is that the timing is just a little bit wrong.
Oh, what's he gonna do? He's gotta get madder. He's gotta get so much madder.
It reminds me, since The West Wing came up already, I talk about that show too much, but I think it is like an it is like it is the reference point for like now two generations of sort of people that write about politics, people who follow politics or participate in it by watching the news or whatever. And its
Bernie
influence
Sanders'
really is
favorite TV show.
Don't get me started on that one. That's one of those like that's too painful to contemplate. But like, I did like that Bernie's wife was on Twitter recently defending The Irishman from the Hacks at Netflix.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So I love the idea of them watching that, less so them sitting down to watch, Jed Bartlett and the team privatize Social Security or whatever.
This is why they say never meet your heroes.
We're full of multitudes.
But like The West Wing, right? Like I think it really did influence. Well, it influenced the way that like people portrayed politics on TV because it was such and in films, and then it also made a whole generation, at least one generation of political operatives and politicians themselves. Like they were like, well, this is what politics is supposed to look like, so now we're gonna like just cosplay as this, and that was what the Obama presidency was. But like the debate scenes in this movie made me think about like I think there's a few debate episodes of The West Wing where like basically you see Jed Bartlett and, you know, the Republican says stuff about like, oh, well, I don't want our kids learning Eskimo poetry or something. And then Bartlett just like totally owns him with his own logic. And then it cuts to like Bradley Whitford and he's going like, game on. All right. And then you don't see the whole rest of the debate. And then it cuts to the very end and you just see the Republican go up to Jed Bartlett and be like, oh, it's over. Like you owned me.
Yeah.
And so I feel like this film is very much operating on that wavelength and that Barry Levinson might have even just like watched that scene from The West Wing.
It's bizarro Sorkin though, because like with Sorkin, it is that thing where the liberal owns the reactionary through facts and logic. Whereas this is more like we are supposed to be excited by the spectacle. We are supposed to be excited that something big is happening in that he's speaking truth to power ? But like, it's not as much that he is saying anything specific as it is that he is being really entertaining in a way that politicians normally aren't. And we're supposed to be excited that somebody who's just like a normal guy is out there, man, even though he doesn't really have very much to say. And that's odd to me.
Right. He says that he wants a car that runs on helium because this was back when we were talking about hydrogen cell cars.
Famously non-combustible.
And helium is a noble gas. It's on the far right of the table of elements. You can't burn it.
The pundits after the debate, they dragged the husk of Chris Matthews and threw him in front of a camera. And he says this line, which I don't understand, and I really need someone to explain it to me. How are voters going to react to Tom Dobbs? Either he's a hot dog or the genuine article. What does that mean?
You've never heard of that? You never heard of that dichotomy before? On the one side you got the hot dog, on the other side the genuine article.
Yeah.
What is
that a Canadian expression? I don't know.
What is it supposed to be?
It's the ultimate Manichaean binary.
I feel like that line was supposed to be for Carville because that's absolutely the kind of thing that Carville says.
He would say that because he just says insane.
It's supposed to be a hot dog or it's supposed to be the real thing.
Wow. Jack tells Tom that it's Jack being Christopher Walken tells Tom that it's good, actually, and that he thinks it's really going somewhere. And then
he has a heart attack.
He has a heart attack. Womp womp. Goes to the hospital.
We're in the hospital, baby.
The stakes have been raised.
Too many things happen in this movie. Like it has too much on its mind and also nothing on its mind. But it's like it's constantly throwing you these curveballs where it's like, okay, comedian runs for president. Oh, is he going to win? Oh, he's going to win. Wait, curveball. Now, like this character, this Christopher Walken character, we've just been introduced to like in the last 15 or 20 minutes, he has a heart attack. And it's like, and then you got all this stuff going on with Laura Linney where it's like, now she's like in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, and now she's ODing on drugs, like at her like weird Google office that she works at. Like it's
fucking wild.
There's too much happening.
So Laura Linney like raises her. Is this the day of the election? Time is so weird in this movie.
It's the night of the election. The election is wrapped up in one night. And they're
because
watching
the voting is so fast because it's on the cloud now.
Right.
Yeah, they're watching the results come in, and somehow by Laura Linney watching the results come in real time, she's just like, the glitch wasn't fixed. The glitch that I noticed earlier wasn't fixed, which is impossible to tell.
She had tried to like blow the whistle on this. She had called her boss, and he's like, no.
She had sent him 16 million emails.
She keeps talking to her friend. What is his name? Davey or something like that.
I don't fucking know.
That
who
actor
cares?
from Slings and Arrows. But then she's like, someone's in my house now, and we have a like 3-minute scene where someone's in her house. And
it's
then
a lot
we
of
get
Laura Linney
jump-scared.
opening doors and there not being anyone there. She opens the shower at one point in like a 1.5-minute scene where she just opens the shower door and closes it again.
But the whole thing is setting us up for this fucking jump scare.
She gets jump scared, and then she gets injected with every drug.
Every drug.
All drugs
Every
in one
single
syringe.
drug is in a syringe.
Including a memory eraser, I guess?
It's a drug that both knocks her out for the rest of the night. She wakes up not knowing anything has happened, and now she's on cocaine.
Right.
And it's the memory erasure device from Men in Black as well.
Right. Yeah. Holds out the little thing.
It's funny that they made her forget, because actually, like, the drive for the movie would have been so much better had she remembered that she was attacked, because then at least she could be like, she could have like concrete proof of the conspiracy other than saying like the machine was wrong just over and over again for 90 minutes.
And I'm sorry, but I know we all love Laura Linney, but this scene where she's at her office and freaking out. And is it Ellie Kemper who shows up to say, "Hey, you look unwell"?
I don't know, but
It's not Ellie Kemper.
She's not. We do love Laura Linney.
This is a terrible scene.
This is another example.
It's poorly acted. Like
There's just too much happening in this movie. Like she has this whole sort of banter back and forth with the guy behind the counter that like seems to set him up as like a character, and then like another guy wanders on, into the
he calls
shot
her a
and,
bitch.
yeah, and it's like, who are these people? Why is this happening in this movie? If this movie would honestly be, it still wouldn't be good. But if you just cut the entire like voting machine Laura Linney subplot out,
right?
First of all, I think that the movie would be better. Secondly, I think it would be at least as coherent, if not more coherent, with all that. Like, just don't edit the film any more than just take out all the scenes with like Jeff Goldblum and the CEO and Laura Linney.
Right.
Like the Laura Linney stuff where it's like a romance. I guess you can like keep
my
keep
God.
that in. But like
She's just like
the
a
movie
fan
would-
of his,
Yeah, the movie would
trying to
make-
find love.
Do not keep the romance.
I agree, don't
in.
keep the romance.
That's the worst part of this movie. It's like, oh, we're in a romantic comedy now.
Well, because what ends up happening is that Laura Linney, that character, ends up bearing the load of almost the entire thing. I would argue that she is more crucial to the plot than Robin Williams.
Oh, yeah,
is.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean she has this freak out, this huge breakdown
because
in her
of
company.
every drug.
Because of every drug.
She goes through every kind of high possible.
At the coffee shop at her company's Google-like headquarter building.
And it strikes me that this is one of those cases where a really good actor is given just like a garbage script to play, and they're just like, okay, so what I'm gonna do is the most. I'm gonna do I'm gonna put every fiber of my acting being into this script, and that will make it good because the writing is just not there. But if you put too much acting on a bad script, it tumbles like a house of cards.
So she shows up at this like party. I guess it's Robin Williams' birthday party. She has an FBI badge. She has this FBI badge, and so I was like, oh, a lot of time has passed. He's now president, and like, no. It's like 2 weeks later. She just pretends to be FBI.
It's bizarre.
I think she's not actually FBI, even though they make a whole thing about how the Secret Service, vetted her and she got past them to be able to talk to the president so that they could dance to some Katie Tunstall.
Tom Dobbs is having a birthday party.
Yeah.
She infiltrates it undercover as an FBI agent very unconvincingly. And even though she immediately gets clocked by Secret Service, Robin Williams is like, cool, she seems nice, let her through. And at this point, she tries her absolute best to tell him what is going on, but because of plot,
He's having such a good time. She can't ruin his night like this.
Right.
They go paintballing. They have Thanksgiving together.
The movie's got another like 45 minutes to fill out, so we can't jump the gun just
stretch
yet.
that out.
So say there's more plot that needs to happen. And in terms of that plot, the next thing that happens is she goes back to the hotel. She calls her boyfriend / coworker. I don't know.
Danny, yes, who the company is trying to pay off to go to Ireland, and she also stays in a motel called the Emerald Isle Motel, and I don't get it. I don't understand what's being referenced
Listen,
here.
It's the Hibernian conspiracy.
The Irish
we all
lore
know what's happening here.
is really, really important. So I don't know, some more fucking bullshit happens, but bottom line, she keeps running simulations because she still has access to this cloud-based voting database for some reason.
Yeah, she's not running simulations on like a locally downloaded build.
She's running them on
working
actual
through
data
the
sets.
system.
Because they didn't deny her access for some reason.
And no matter what, she keeps discovering that no matter what, Dobbs wins. And the reason, I guess, is that he has 2 sequential letter B's in his name.
So the glitch comes from the fact that it's counting double letters in alphabetical order, and somehow that is causing certain votes to redirect with prioritizing the highest double letters on the alphabetical scale.
This is another, by the way, this is another reason why like the film, like just nothing about it works, and why it again contends to have a lot on its mind and actually has nothing on its mind. Because if you were going to execute this plot and this subplot in an interesting way, like the glitch wouldn't just be some random thing that like also no company, even like a malicious Silicon Valley giant, would design a program that bad and sell it to the federal government. That would never happen. So it's like if there was something interesting going on here, there would be some politics to the glitch. It would be like, like, I don't know what it would be, but it would, it would weight the votes of certain people more than others, or it would, you know, there'd be some point like that.
Let's say, for instance, that, you know, there was like an Iowa caucus where there were a few different candidates, and maybe one of them had better connections to the companies who were programming the software that, you know, counted the votes for the Iowa caucus. I'm not saying it did happen. I'm just saying.
And what if the company running that brand new caucus app that no one knew how to use had a very creepy, weird name? I don't know.
Well, look, okay, so all of that plot stuff would actually be able to make sense if Dobbs were a corrupt, like, dude, but because it's Robin Williams, he has to be a saint. So the actual whole movie falls apart because it's only interesting if Dobbs gets power hungry and is like, I deserve the presidency.
It's like the election's not rigged. It's just an accident that it's
a mistake.
It doesn't make any sense.
It's a tabulation error.
And I think there is an interesting movie that could be made about, like, someone getting elected president by a series of accidents like that, just to, like, if the comment is just about how stupid and arbitrary all of this ends up becoming, but then he also, again, he can't be a saint. He has to be this idiot asshole. And they try to, like, the one time they start to veer into, like, actual cultural political commentary is the, like, one scene with Jeff Goldblum where he's like, the illusion of legitimacy is more important than legitimacy itself. And it's like, okay, we made our point.
Right,
Fuck
it's all
it. Here's
done in
the romantic
shadow. Like, their faces are completely, like, it's total noir. It's very bad.
I think also that the whole thing about potentially having a point of, well, no matter what, these systems are bullshit and arbitrary on some level. Barry Levinson would never make a point like that because he is so enamored with these institutions, right? He cares about them deeply. And to make any sort of a claim like, at the end of the day, this is all just kind of bullshit that we go along with no matter what, it seems like it's going in that direction, but it's not. What ends up happening next is, oh God, we're at a Thanksgiving party. Laura Linney pulls Robin Williams away from the table, and it's like, you're not the president because of the voting system, and you got to know. And she leaves, and
even though like she doesn't know what the actual count is,
right?
She just knows it's a glitched count.
Yeah. Well, we never find out, right? It's like how many votes?
No, we don't actually know.
In the final sort of, you know, soliloquy he gives on SNL, which is like, you know, as we all know, is where all the important stuff happens.
We will get to that.
Yeah. Like, you know, like he says something about like, oh, I know some of you did vote for me, and there's like some applause. He's like, well, thanks for that, and it's like, okay, how many people actually voted for this like charlatan comedian to be president? Because like, probably it can't have been more than like, I don't know how many, like 1 million ironic voters. How many like voters do we think like would vote ironically for this guy?
Unless I misunderstood, one of the big things was that he wasn't on the ballot in every state.
Yeah, there were 5 states he was not on the ballot for.
And he happened to win every single state that he was on the ballot for, I think?
Yes. And it's
it's like a Reagan-style landslide, but then also really no one voted for him, which like I think people would notice that, whatever the voting machine said.
I thought
the only person who knows.
Yeah. I thought the idea of that was supposed to be that, actually probably a lot of people voted for him, but it could not have been stacked in his favor because he was off the ballot in major states. But who knows?
Yeah, well, I mean, when we're tracking it on the actual election night, there is, like, he's behind in the exit polls at the beginning of the night, but as it goes along, he starts winning more and more and more.
Well, it's the exit polls that are behind, and the exit polls are carried out by independent media pollsters who are standing outside of the polls and polling people as they leave the
glitch is
door.
dumb.
So that is not done by the system.
But also, if the exit polls didn't line up at all with what came out in the final tally, people would raise red flags.
But Lauren is the only one who's concerned about this.
Because we've had some issues with vote counts not really matching the exit polls, and nothing happens.
I love living in a functional democracy, don't you? Yeah. So Robin Williams decides that he is going to go public. He's going to take the information about these fucking voting machines, go public, let everybody know, the count actually was wrong. And the evil Jeff Goldblum, who is the CEO, assistant to the CEO?
He's the legal counsel. He's the legal counsel.
Here's another question. Why didn't they just make Jeff Goldblum the CEO? Like, why are there 2 characters? Why is there so much character duplication?
Who cares? Oh my God. But Jeff Goldblum then decides to basically sick the full force of the company.
Why didn't they just kill her at the beginning? They had a guy go into her house and inject her with every drug known to man. Just kill her.
Yeah, well, inject her with enough drugs to kill her. Exactly. But no, that would be a problem. I don't fucking know,
Especially for
man.
someone who doesn't take drugs, who is afraid of NyQuil.
We end up
somehow survives this nuclear bomb of drugs.
We end up in a race condition, basically, where one or the other of them is going to get the release out first. It ends up being Jeff Goldblum. They get out ahead of the story by being like, actually, this woman was, on drugs. She was crazy and cool.
And that she... But they come out with this thing that should have more impact because they say that she worked to rig the election in favor of Dobbs.
Right.
And then they're like, but we fixed it before that happened.
And there were no irregularities at all. Our
in the
firewalls
election
are
that
fireproof.
in this election that he won. Like, what? Help me make sense of this. Somebody help me make sense of any of this. Luke, can you help me make sense of any of this?
No is the answer, but I mean, look, I think we've gone through enough of the film that I'll tell you guys what my ultimate thesis on the whole thing is, which is which is this is a film that wants to be, a comedy about, what if Jon Stewart got elected president? Okay, it wants to be an Alfred Hitchcock thriller. It wants to be kind of like The West Wing, and it wants to be like an earnest romance, and it wants to make the point, undercutting a bunch of the others, that actually, well, no, a comedian shouldn't be president because the jester shouldn't rule the kingdom. And the irony of all that is that Robin Williams' whole political shtick throughout this movie is that politicians are just too damned inauthentic. They try to be all things to all people and blah, blah, blah. This movie is trying to be all things to all people. It is trying to capture every market niche, just over-professionalized, over-scripted centrist politicians do. And as a result, it ends up being appealing to nobody. It is the Hillary Clinton of political movies. It is terrible.
I can't stress enough how much of this movie feels like filler. There's a paintball meet cute section where Robin Williams pulls up to Laura Linney's Emerald Isle motel room, and the limo is playing bow-diddy, bang-dee, dang, diggy, diggy, which is the song of, I think, the late 90s. It does feel incredibly out of place in 2006. And then they just go paintballing, but it's in the woods, and it lasts maybe 3 seconds before
so odd.
Laura Linney's like, I have to tell you something. And he's like, what do you have to tell me? And she's just, I really wanted to see you, haha. And she says, oh, you really wanted to see me? And completely forgets about the life and death stakes of she's being pursued by a company that wants her dead because she got the beautiful eyes of Robin Williams cutting through to her very soul.
Right, it's because she's a woman, AJ.
There is a low key sexism to this movie. Did you guys notice how many of Robin Williams's his riffs are sort of weird, horny or thirsty things? He has that riff about how he wants to appoint lesbians to cabinet. It's they wouldn't get a lot done, but the downloads would be amazing, and we get to think about what they're doing in the cabinet room or something.
Behind closed doors.
There's tons of jokes like that,
Why are you doing the Mickey Mouse laugh, AJ? Is that
I don't know. I don't have a Robin Williams, so.
But I don't. Again, it's what were they trying to even? What was Barry trying to accomplish through this? Because I feel on some level, these are the best jokes that he knows how to tell. Right? That's got to be part of it.
Well, the closest it comes to a thesis, beyond Jeff Goldblum's thing, which is just its own thing, is when they have Lewis Black.
Yeah, we should talk about Lewis
in
Black's
the Situation Room,
yeah.
and he says, the problem is television, right? The problem is that when you watch a cable news show, they have on one side of the screen a guy who knows everything about the Holocaust, who's written, who's worked on the documentation, who's written books of history. And on the other side, you have a guy who thinks the Holocaust isn't real, and they're on the same plane. That is the problem with TV news specifically. Meanwhile, Laura Linney is trying to put $1 in a vending machine.
Right.
And you know what? Her want of cold drinks really saves her.
And it's that kind of thing too. Again, this is a movie that I think purports to have this very transgressive premise, and it's the most garden variety point about our politics used to be smarter and now they're dumb because we're putting we just need to listen to the experts and blah blah blah. That's just straight up like liberal smugness. Like that's not an interesting point. It's like, TV is dumbing us down because we're, it's like, it's so stupid.
It is interesting to see this, this is the moment where still everyone's just emailing, I guess. They haven't
16 million of them.
Yeah, so they haven't gotten to the internet thing, and it's funny to see some of the things that they're saying about TV here just get completely repackaged for the internet, as though the internet had no precedent.
Yeah.
As though it was a brand new thing when social media really started to pick up and get politics involved in it.
It also makes me wonder, and I didn't look into this, but to the point of like how it feels a bit anachronistic. Like, to me, this movie felt like it was in the late 90s. Even though it was the mid 2000s. I wonder if this script was written earlier, because...
Do you think the 90s had the same sort of anxiety around voting machines? Because I feel like that of course, but I mean, the basic premise could still be something that Barry Levinson had in the 90s. And then he was like, I should add a voting machine thing now after 2000.
I agree
and
with
2004.
that. I think the script could have been written in the 90s, and then they just shoehorned a bunch of stuff in to make it topical. Like they're like, put a line in about hanging chads or whatever. Like I think it came up earlier, but I mean that Jon Stewart film Irresistible, which came out in the summer of 2020. That movie, I mean, there's no way that movie wasn't a script that he made, wrote in 2009 or something. Because it's got references that are supposed to kind of bring it up to date to make it like a 2020 movie. But then also there's stuff like, someone gave a speech and it set the net-roots on fire, and it's like, okay, this is not the mid 2000s anymore. Why is this in the movie? I think
these net forums are exploding.
You're not getting all your latest information from Daily Kos, Luke? Come on.
Like the idea that this movie has is that politics was actually the realm of smart people and good things until Nixon did the checkers speech on TV in California. And then everything went downhill. Everything got stupid just because of the televised medium. But it also offers this other point in that there is comedy. Anyway, Laura Linney is still trying to put $1 in that vending machine.
I just wanted to say, like, it's interesting, like, that there's this anxiety about technology that runs through the film. Because I mean, when you think about it, it's an anxiety that goes back to the very to the beginnings of mass media, and probably I don't know this, but I bet you if you go back to the 19th century, there are versions of it in relation to newspapers, and then probably before that,
sure, 100%,
the printing press. It's there's that famous thing about how the Kennedy Nixon debate, right? People who watched it on TV thought that Kennedy won, and people that listened to it thought that Nixon won, which was sort of supposed to be the radio. The takeaway there is the radio is superior because it's more direct and less superficial. It doesn't vulgarize and trivialize politics. You can go further back, and I mean it didn't really happen in the way it's often remembered, but there was a whole thing about Orson Welles and the War of the Worlds broadcast, and how it drove the whole East Coast insane, which the historical record doesn't bear that out. It's apocryphal, but the fact that people think that happened is a testament to how anxious all of us really are. I think about the power of these technologies to actually alter outcomes and affect the real world. It's our persistent fear of the medium actually becoming the message, which you would think would give it a lot of fertile ground for a film like this to say something interesting, but but perhaps that's too much to ask.
I'm checking in on Laura Linney. She's still trying to put that $1 in the vending machine.
Yeah, she's having a lot of trouble.
Somehow
it's hard, guys. Have you used a bill acceptor? This is why this is why you got it right in Canada, Luke. You have fucking loonies and toonies. It's much easier.
Well, again, further to the film's thesis, back in the day, there used to be coins. There's something pure about the coin; it can't be corrupted. Now we have all these machines, and they're complicating. Can't even get a Kit Kat bar anymore.
No. Right? This movie is actually just a much more subtle. This is like if Defense from Falling Down got to direct a movie and he's like, the Coke cans aren't a nickel anymore.
Laura Linney goes into the hotel manager's office.
Yeah, even though she's just been paying cash, somehow this guy knows who she is. I don't okay,
You're
sure,
Eleanor
fine.
Green from the TV. in the most like creepy Hitchcockian performance, I think, of this whole movie is this fucking
she
hotel
goes to
guy.
a room and it's being infiltrated by, I don't know, Blackwater mercenaries working for the electronic voting company.
Who don't notice when she pushes the door open?
Yeah, she sees that they're looking at her computer. They are in her room.
Eric Prince personally is looking at her computer.
And she just drives away.
Yeah, she gets out of there.
She has a cell phone. She does not call the police. She does not call Robin Williams yet. She goes all the way to the mall first.
Yeah, she zips off in
Robin
her
Williams.
blue PT Cruiser, which
return to tradition. That's what I said.
They paid handsomely for this product placement.
They sure did. It's a big Robin Williams picture.
Why didn't she? She could. They weren't the police. It's not like the police are after her and she has nowhere to run. These are guys. These are just fucking guys that broke into her room.
And it also cuts to them reporting to Jeff Goldblum, and Jeff Goldblum screams the line, "I want constant updates," which I just imagine he just stays on the phone with them. He's like, "How about now? Now? How about now?"
She goes to the mall and they try to do another like haha topical joke. I guess.
The fucking thing with the phone chargers.
Because her phone battery dies.
Oh, these
she
teens
goes
on
over
their
to
phones.
this 20-year-old at the fucking counter and is like, "Do you have a charger?" She's like, "No." "How old is that?" She's like, "It's a year old." She's like, "Wow, you should get a newer phone, bitch."
Wow, your James Carville is really coming along. Really shining in this episode, Brian.
I mean, it is something that's a little bit real because back then every phone had its own fucking port for a charger. Also, this is just really stupid. Why did her battery die? It doesn't matter.
Well,
none of this is so stupid.
To this film's credit, they do actually succeed in pulling off one callback, which is at the beginning, Robin Williams says, all your devices are going to be talking to each other. You know, the GPS is tracking you. It knows where you are. And like one of his like riffs at the beginning. And then it turns out at the end, Laura Linney is being tracked through her GPS system. And it's the one they do.
It's amazing that what this movie is actually about. I mean, I feel like we've actually uncovered, like we've revealed what this movie actually is, which is just like, it's just a movie about like machines are bad, like vending. You can't trust the voting machines. You can't trust the cell phones. You can't trust the GPS, and you can't
trust phone booths.
You can't even trust the machine. You know, you trust that machine where you're getting your Lay's chips every day, but forget about it.
Simple vending machine.
You.
Absolutely. As she continues to get tailed by these goons, Eleanor then calls Dobbs and says, I'm being hunted, something's going on. Because this stupid thing about her maybe having a drug addiction, he doesn't fully take her seriously here. So
like they never actually credibly get rid of this idea that she is crazy and or on drugs.
Right.
He just, I don't know, trusts his
her
gut.
Because he's horny. Because he's very, very horny.
Yeah. And they even mention that. They
Come
even
on.
are like,
For 2
Louis
seconds.
Black is like, you just want to get your dick wet. I don't even think phone booths existed by 2006.
Yeah, they did.
Pay phones, yes, but phone booths that you like, I don't think I ever saw one a day in my entire life.
Well, she's
This
in
is
a
the
phone
scene I
booth.
remember. Yeah, this is the one scene I remember from this movie.
She's in a phone booth making a call, and again, because she's being tailed, there's this big ass fucking like, I don't know, GMC pickup or something like that just drives straight into the phone booth.
Yes.
And
not after Robin Williams tells her to get to an airport hangar, and she screams, "I don't know how to get to an airport."
But again, this movie's so weird about like time and place and everything. Mostly because probably in part because it's shot in Canada. That like.
Well, it's funny you should say that because the number of locations that I recognize, like, okay, for example, but seriously, so the main shooting locations are Hamilton, Ontario, where I went to high school, and Toronto, where I've lived for the last, I don't know, 14 years or something. So like, there's a scene early on where there's like a establishing shot of a building or something, and it's like Robin Williams speaking in a gymnasium. I swear to God, that is like a 5-minute walk from where I'm recording from.
Oh, that's
right now.
so funny.
I have to say, it's been really something in the last few years to see a bunch of things that would have otherwise been, Toronto playing a U.S. city. They're now making it Albuquerque.
Oh, weird.
Where Albuquerque has to fill in for everything else.
I was just looking out the window, like across my balcony, and I swear to God, I can quite literally see one of the other buildings that was in this movie. It's like
that's awesome.
University College, where I went to school. Like, is like I can see it from my balcony. And yeah, it's literally in this movie.
Is Barry Levinson in one of the windows just waving at you? I know you're talking about my movie.
So,
He's wearing the outfit from Toys, the purple derby hat.
So after Eleanor's phone booth gets rammed by the truck,
Which also, when she was talking, she sounds like she's crazy, right? She keeps just saying stuff like, I figured it all out. It's the double letters. I figured it all out. Which seems like the movie is trying to direct you into thinking Robin Williams is going to be like, oh, yeah, she's actually crazy.
Right.
But no. Her injury is reported on the news, which is also how he learns about it, I guess. And so he immediately then has his entire motorcade drive over there so that he can...
Also, he was just hanging out with the president. He saw the Oval Office for the first time. He had the meeting where they tell him the aliens are real.
Right.
Yep. He moves the entire motorcade to go to Laura Linney, despite Lewis Black's objections that we gotta get to SNL.
So then Robin Williams gets into the back of the ambulance with Laura Linney, and this is
and she still sounds crazy. Now she's just rambling, double B, double L, double B, double L.
But wasn't this just such a beautiful, heart-wrenching scene? Didn't it give you all the feels? Didn't it make you feel so... make you ponder the finiteness and the fragility of life?
Because I kept thinking I'm still aging as this is going on. I am one day closer to death.
Made me think, God damn, I want to fucking kill myself right now.
Laura Linney is saying the double B, the double L with like just such earnestness that like she is trying so hard to elevate this script, and it's
oh my God, it's incredible.
Do it. You just can't do it. It's garbage.
This is actually going to be the last we see of Laura Linney. Why don't we just take a moment here to briefly talk about our thoughts on the in memoriam, rest in peace, Laura Linney.
In the arms of the angels.
Much like AJ, she is dead.
I can see the sky for forever.
Well, I mean, I feel bad for her because, like, she exists as part of a subplot that rightly shouldn't exist. This whole movie was sold to people as like, hey, what if Jon Stewart ran for president? And then actually it's like trying to be a romantic comedy, and also it's about how like the machines are destroying democracy or something. Like, yeah, I just feel bad for her. Like she shouldn't be in this movie.
I mean, like, there's no arc for her to have. There's her, like, she discovers a problem and then waits to tell the person in question about it because she's just a woman. She just can't get over her emotions on seeing Robin Williams for the first time.
And her entire existence too is defined by the men around her. Like, even down to the fact that her fucking coworker/boyfriend ?
I thought he was her son. For a large part of this movie. It's not. He's
a
not.
very youthful face.
But they're like sitting watching TV together at night, and he does look young-ish. So I thought maybe this was like a younger brother or like a son kind of scenario. But I think they're just buds.
Okay. I mean, look, they could have thrown
He's in
off...
Ireland now, I guess. Who cares?
They could have had at least one other named female character and had the two of them work together. I don't fucking... Like,
he does have two women working on his staff who are mostly
what are their names? What are their names?
No. Their job is to look at the news report of Laura Linney getting in that accident and going, oh no. And then this just cuts away from them entirely.
And to laugh at Robin Williams' really good jokes. That's something actually that I wanted to mention real quick. I found it really uncanny how there would be a joke that really wasn't even a joke, didn't even really rise to the level of the joke, and you would just get this uproarious laughter.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again.
There's something really interesting about that. Like, when you watch a comedy, people don't laugh in it, right?
Right.
Like, there's something weird about that effect. And this actually bridges us very well to SNL because it's the perfect example of that. Because most of the SNL scene is shot facing the audience. And they're all losing their shit every time Robin Williams just does a little... Hey. And that's it. Like, he doesn't even make the joke, but everyone's loving it. They're just having so much fun, which makes it less funny to you, the viewer, right? Because you don't feel the audience is laughing alongside you like you would with the sitcom or an episode of SNL. You're feeling like the joke is for the benefit of another character.
Yeah. Well, it's because it does seem like most of Robin Williams' scenes were completely improvised. Like it does, the way everyone's laughing in the room and riffing with him does feel like kind of like an improv hangout more than it.
Which was very true of Good Morning Vietnam and Toys and all the other stuff that Barry Levinson does with Robin Williams.
Right.
So he goes on SNL. It's this big thing. He comes at, it's like, oh, here's our guy, the usual SNL thing. This is the Amy Poehler, Tina Fey era. He's on Weekend Update. He's just there to do some bits and then to also like disavow that he ever knew Laura Linney.
They've
which
set
is
up
a weird place to do that.
They've set up a whole series of cue cards for him in this Weekend Update bit that he can then use to dissociate himself from Laura Linney. And Luke, I'm curious to hear sort of your thoughts on the way that this scene is structured, is set up, and then the way that it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it reflects like, something we've talked about already, which is that, the people behind this movie think that like speeches on TV are where like that's where the real shit happens. Like that's the motor of politics. It's the motor of history. But something I really like, I mean, just, in a final like act of indignity undercutting, its own premises, this movie is constantly, as was just said, it's constantly cutting to people, like people in the audience, lots of shots throughout the movie of people at home, like watching him on TV do his riffs and they can't get enough of it. They're laughing. And it's like, it seems like it's trying to celebrate the fact that like, oh, comedians is where we get the news now. These people are more authentic than the politicians. And then the whole point of this final scene is contained within that line where he's like, oh, I was sitting in the Oval Office and I did a little reality check and I realized the jester shouldn't rule the kingdom. My job is to prod the politicians and but we're not there to rule. And then at the end when it goes back to turns out the whole movie's just been all in Christopher Walken's like head during this.
What if none of this happened? What if it was entirely his creation?
The movie is actually about one man's mental illness.
I mean, that would honestly make a lot more sense. But keep going, Luke.
Christopher Walken says, the president did get reelected, and you know what? He was better, not great, but better.
And I think it was because
not even good. He just like made some slight incremental changes, which is what the American dream is really about.
Right. So the whole movie is kind of like, oh, we're getting our news from Bill Maher and Jon Stewart and Robin Williams, and then it's like, oh yeah, but actually no, comedians, they have a place and it's like very small.
Yeah.
And, like literally the most they could do is one could accidentally get elected president and make like a Democrat govern like very slightly better in a way that's like vague, like too vague to even define, and that's
all we can really hope for.
Well, and that initial thing that you were saying about SNL too, it's like, yeah, it seems like the thesis of this movie is the problem with media today is they're doing the Lewis Black thing. They're putting two people on the same level who do not have the same credibility because they have no perspective. But comedy is our way forward because comedy has perspective. And that's what's going to guide us. They shouldn't be leaders, but they should replace the media, maybe.
Yeah.
And again, it would be interesting if Robin Williams learned something about like he starts to see himself become a monster, or he starts to see the kind of like horrible things he'll have to do and he can't do that. But no, he just stands in the Oval Office and just feels the crushing weight of it.
But that's
too much.
The thing about that, though, is I think it speaks to, again, the perspective of a guy like Barry Levinson about what the office means. Yeah. This idea that, and I was after I watched the movie, I was kind of taking some notes and trying to put my thoughts together about this. There is this respect for the office that existed up until Donald Trump became president that will never exist anymore, right? Like, even among like people who previously believed in the sanctity of the fucking office or whatever, the election of Donald Trump completely disabused us of this idea that the presidency of the United States is in some way, shape, or form above or removed from the scum and villainy that permeates the Vox Populi, right?
Right.
And this, to me, is one of the key themes of this film as well, which is that if you want to talk about the presidency of the United States, which is this great, glorious, beautiful, shining thing, you cannot pollute it with the sort of vulgarity and so forth that somebody like Robin Williams' character brings to the table. Because that's another piece of Williams' character that we sort of mentioned. He's a very vulgar guy. A lot of his riffs, a lot of his jokes are crass and crude. And there is, I think, we see by the end of this, the sense that if this were to come up to the presidency, well, that wouldn't be good for the country, you know, man?
Yeah, and how uncomfortable he is sitting behind the Resolute desk or whatever, and how it's just like, wow, this is much bigger than I thought it would be, haha. And here's the thing about Robin Williams in this movie, and it's something that happens with a lot, I think, of big stars. Will Smith, it certainly happened with as well, where you get to a point of fame and time in your career where you don't want to play characters with flaws anymore because people are going to see your persona on screen. And if your persona is bad, then everyone will be like, well, that means Robin Williams is also bad. And the same thing happened with Will Smith in 7 Pounds, which I think rhymes with this movie in a lot of ways because it's trying to be a romantic comedy and also like a really gut-wrenching drama about a man who dies by jellyfish.
A guy who commits suicide by jellyfish in a bathtub.
Yes.
Sweet.
In order to sell his organs. And I long for the movie that could have been where he could have been a little bit more despicable. Like there could have been like a moment where he's actually tempted to like take the power.
Well, AJ, I have some great news for you. I know that we're not all hot on Elia Kazan and his life or his choices, but he actually made a fantastic movie called A Face in the Crowd, starring Andy Griffith as a folk singer who realizes that he can tap into the politics of the day and get a lot of attention and then starts to run for office. And it does so by being very specific, and it does so with a fucking terrifying performance by Andy Griffith, of all fucking people.
Interesting. Playing against type?
Playing very much against type, yeah. I mean, this is Andy Griffith doing an Elia Kazan movie, right? It's
Interesting.
Like, it's interesting in how it predicts sort of a figure like Trump in a very realistic way up until the end, because what ends up happening is he gets recorded talking in private about what he thinks about the people he appeals to, and that tanks him. That destroys his momentum. Right. Where with Donald Trump, he just goes out there and he's like, "You're all pigs. You're filth. You're disgusting people. You love it when I do this, don't you? You love it." And they're like, yes, yes, we do. Fuck it.
The way this movie ends is very, the exact same thing applies that I said about like the voting machines plot, where it's like with the voting machines plot, there's no politics to the glitch. It's totally arbitrary. It's just a random glitch that doesn't make any sense. Similarly, like, the movie, has this like supposedly bold premise, and then we don't actually get to see Robin Williams be president. Like if this film actually worked, and if it had the courage to even try to execute its own mission, it wouldn't like take place in like, I don't know, the span of a few days after like a comedian like doesn't actually win an election. It's like he would win the election, and then we would actually see him be in office, and then the film would actually about like, okay, well what happens then? And then like as one of you was saying, then it would be about like, okay, well, what's his flaw? What stops him? Like, what stops this from working? And then the point the film would be making might be good, it might be bad, probably the latter. But at least there'd be something. It would be saying something. This film is saying nothing at all.
With the American electoral system, if the vote is completely illegitimate, we don't have anything in place for that. Like we theoretically do with the Electoral College, but you can see how that goes. Every time, someone's just going to write in fucking Patricia McCloskey instead of Donald Trump or whatever. Again, like The West Wing, this exists in a fantasy world.
Yep.
Or like Toys. It's this whimsical fantasy world about things that you don't really need to think too much about the process. It's just the vote was wrong and then we fixed it.
Right.
Because we said it was wrong. And because one man said it was wrong.
And like the Democratic and Republican establishment would just let an independent win. Do you know what I mean? Like they would make no effort for any recounts or investigating the vote. They'd just be like, well, fair's fair. I guess you won.
So the thing that I sort of wanted to conclude on here in terms of how we can then take what we've heard and talked about this fucking movie and see what it says about maybe where we're going is something that I found when I was searching for stuff about Barry Levinson. And in August 2020, he wrote an op-ed along with David Smick, And the two of them were put together a movie called Stars and Strife. And
No, what?
No.
Those of our listeners who also listen to Chapo Trap House might remember that when that movie came out, those guys did a really great recap of the film and its anti-politics. So if that is at all of interest to you, would definitely recommend going and checking out that episode.
Stars and Strife.
But yeah, the movie's called Stars and Strife. Stars and Strife. This was written by a guy named David Smick, who also wrote a book called The World is Curved. And this was, of course, then produced, EP'd by Barry Levinson. So in this op-ed from USA Today, I want to read just a little bit of this that I think encapsulates the worldview that guys like Barry Levinson have. I think even though this is more recent, it also dovetails nicely with the anti-politics of Man of the Year and really helps us understand what the actual undergirding message is here, the thing they're really trying to propagandize for underneath the spectacle. So America is in crisis, and it's not just from the coronavirus that is plaguing our communities. We are in the midst of an epidemic of hatred that has left most of us feeling hopeless and exhausted. There are social, cultural, and racial explanations for our predicament, but evidence suggests that a feeling of economic humiliation, which manifests as fear, and a politics devoid of empathy, is at the core of our divisions. So then they pitch
the divisions, not the divisions.
You hate to see the divisions. So they go on to fucking pitch the documentary, talk about growing up in working class neighborhoods in Baltimore and how all that shit was. But just to fast forward here then to sort of the conclusion. Main Street capitalism would remove entrenched advantages for special interests and empower wage earners.
Oh my God.
And I see you nodding, Luke. You understand this common sense intuition.
I've
The
seen
local small business owners.
I have actually seen this movie, believe it or not.
Oh my God.
Oh, Christ.
It would eliminate corporate tax carve-outs and rules that stifle competition. It would also eliminate racist barriers to capital and wealth creation. An inclusive entrepreneurial spirit is at the beating heart of Main Street capitalism. Business startups are the economy's great equalizer. Women have started firms at twice the rate of men in recent years, and their empowering is transforming the economy. Immigrants account for 1/4 of all American entrepreneurs. The solution to our economic and political malaise is not tossing capitalism aside. It is to rediscover a Main Street capitalism that leverages the best parts of our economy to make the American dream possible for average working families. Both of our political parties need to stop the food fight and work to break the cycle of disillusionment that crushes the spirit of so many Americans.
We must stop the Charlie Sheen vehicle food fight.
This is more recent. This op-ed was, references the coronavirus. Was this written in 2020?
This is August 2020.
So the big problem facing America right now, it will be easily solved by opening all the businesses on Main Street in August of 2020.
Exactly, Brian. That's exactly right.
If I'm remembering rightly, now there were two films. There's also one called The Reunited States, which is basically the same movie as
That's awesome.
I think Stars and Strife is the one where their big idea, like the thing that's going to make what do they call it, Main Street capitalism happen, is unless I'm misremembering, this is the film where the pitch is everybody begins life with $20,000, every American, but it's not a grant, it's a loan. So you're born into this world and you owe the federal government $20,000. and I don't think they call it a freedom dividend, but like they may as well. Like it's basically
oh my God.
That's so good.
Like, and so you're right to bring this up.
Is it at least tax advantaged? I hope that it's tax advantaged and gives me like a special savings account.
I hope I can put it into 3 separate tax deferred savings accounts.
I don't even remember if it's interest free. Like it might not be. But like,
oh God.
But so like this is. I'm glad you brought this up.
Put babies in the Squid Game.
But it's like you're right to bring this up in relation to Man of the Year because this is exactly the politics that I was talking about before. This is radical centrism, right? It's like you start with this kind of story about American politics that sounds very radical. It sounds kind of anti-establishment. It might even make reference to like there's political corruption and the parties are bought and sold. There's big business, yada yada. And then the pitch is just always like operating on the same wavelength as like mainstream politics and culture does already. It's exactly what Andrew Yang's like Forward Party is, right? Like I don't have them in front of me, but when he pitched the Forward Party, which seems like it's kind of just like a marketing campaign for his book, to be honest. He released these like five the five like foundational beliefs or whatever of the Forward Party, and I'm pretty sure that only two of them like dealt with specifics at all. It's very much like Robin Williams in Man of the Year. It's like one of them had to do with electoral reform. I think the other one was like his basic income idea, and then everything else was just like restore trust in government,
right?
All this kind of stuff, and so
get rid of division,
eliminate division. So it's like this type of politics always begins with this very kind of transgressive premise, and then it ends with just like post-partisan platitudes. It's like a way of thinking about these problems of like polarization and like lack of faith in American institutions or whatever, as if they're kind of spiritual. They're just these sort of diaphanous things.
Yeah.
It's just in the air. And then that's why like in Stars and Strife, like we get the solutions from people like Rahm Emanuel, who's a regular, talking head. Arthur Brooks appears. I think Francis
these are
Fukuyama
real common sense guys.
Seriously, the Mr. End of History himself, Alan Greenspan is in the movie. Like it's just all these.
Whoa!
It's like all these people who like if these aren't the people if these aren't the people who gave us the system that you're complaining about, then I don't know who is.
Well. Whether we're talking about, a shitty fucking attempted comedy or a shitty fucking attempted documentary, we have Barry Levinson to thank for both of these things. And, God bless him. Can't wait to see what he does next.
And we have Luke to thank for bringing us Barry Levinson
Absolutely.
into our lives. So, Luke, do you have anything that you'd like to plug at the end of our time here?
Oh, sure. Well, I have a competitor podcast, Michael and Us. If you like this one, you'll like us. You can find it for free.
They also talk about Adventures in Odyssey. No. Michael and Us is a great show for like if you have heard about a shitty, terrible thing like Stars and Strife, and you're like, I don't want to watch that. Let's see if someone else has talked about it in a way that makes it tolerable to me. It's perfect. It's a perfect podcast for that.
Well, cheers. Yeah. So patreon.com/Michael and Us. I also have a book coming out. You can pre-order it now. It's called The Dead Center. Deals with, I suppose, in a less funny way, deals with a lot of the kinds of things we've talked about on this episode. So if you pre-order it now from Or Books, you can get 15% off.
Luke, I've been following your writing for a really long time, and I think when it comes to sort of the politics of anti-politics, as it were, you are one of the best writers currently working in the space, and
cheers.
The stuff you have to say is really cool. So recommend it to all of our listeners as well. Well, that's pretty much it for this episode. I never want to watch another Robin Williams movie again. At least for a bit. Sorry, guys.
I will make you watch Toys. That is going to happen on this show.
All right. We got to talk about toys. We got to have toy talk.
I think what makes this centrism so interesting is that like it's the most hyper individualized out of all of these projects. The right has completely abandoned the premise that they're really focusing on the individual, right? Mm-hmm. They are focusing on a larger collective project because they know that the project has to be created by a larger system. And what this centrism shows us is that its solution is to buy into the old myth that they kept reading about in books as children, which is that America and democracy is built on the agency of the individual and the morality of the individual. And that is the way forward. And that's why there is no such thing as a centrist party in the United States. There is nothing at all that holds any power because an individual can't do it. I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Joshes. See you next time.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
All right, folks, first up, I have an announcement. We're going to be talking about this again very soon, but we are going to be at the New York City Pinball Championships on Friday, August 19th of this year. 2 1022. We're going to be following up on our old emergency episode about Deep Root Pinball, which you should definitely check out if you haven't, and most likely you haven't because that was a very early episode that we did and it's a lot of fun. If you are a patron, go over to patreon.com, and in a couple of days we're going to put up a discount code. Again, that is for patrons only, so if you are interested in going to the New York City Pinball Championships at a discount, join us over on Patreon. You also get to access our bonus episodes and our premium episodes. How about that? So again, if you want to see us presenting live, following up on the Deep Root story at the New York City Pinball Championships, that date is Friday, August 19th, 2022. Anyway, as always, we are brought to you by our patrons over at Patreon. And they include newcomers such as Mata Mosca, Have You Seen This, Katrina Janssen, Kyle Cassidy, Greenbrier, Sid Miyazaki, Laura, Paul Copeland, and Andrew Hartman. And of course, a special thank you to our $10 patrons, who are Hannah White, Rosie Armstrong, Dara Swisher, Alexa Valentine, Nathan Woods, I Hate Brian Alflord, Nikola Donov, Ashley Stoneman, Timmy Sexton, Tony Diddy, Kenneth Branna Montana, Silverbear 909, John Johnson, Katie Wall, and Annette Alford. See you next time.